Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to this lecture or presentation. In this video, we're going to talk a little bit about auditioning and maybe dispel some myths and mysteries about auditioning, whether you're auditioning for an individual show, an educational theater show, a professional show, a company, for their season, or even a college program. We're not going to dive as deep into the college program conversation because that's going to be handled in some other lectures and conversations. But for now, you can feel free to scroll through, and it's going to be in this cool format where you see a video pop up explaining the slides that you see. Before we dive into the details, I wanted to address some overarching themes that you may encounter as you're looking through materials online or in-person instruction regarding auditioning. First of all, there's a lot of great resources out there on the internet regarding do's and don'ts. Do sing this song. Don't wear that outfit. Do slate like this. Don't slate like that. I understand why those lists are very helpful because it kind of lays out a set of parameters or guidelines for people. But I hope that you as a performer don't get caught up in the do's and don'ts and maybe just take a little time to think about the why. The most common do's and don't lists are regarding overdone material, and we'll talk a little bit about this throughout the presentation. My point of view is if the material is so fantastically in your strike zone of the way you can represent yourself as a performer, then you should sing it. You shouldn't sing it if it's the only musical theater song you know and it may not fit your essence very clearly, and therefore it shows the casting director or director that perhaps you didn't do enough research. But again, thinking about the whys, why perhaps would a casting director or director not want to hear the same song 10 times in a day if they're seeing 200 people? Think about the why, right? The second point here is to think of each audition as a learning experience. If you desire to go into the world of performing or the profession of performing, you're going to get a lot of no's. And most of the time, it has nothing to do with the way you auditioned. There's so many other factors that layer into that. And you should really know that and accept that in your heart. It is not a reflection of how well you did or how good or bad you did. You should remove those thoughts from your brain and instead think of auditioning as a couple different things. First of all, it's an opportunity to perform, whether it's 60 seconds, 90 seconds, 2 minutes. You get to do a mini show for a group of people, most of the time a group of people hopefully that you respect. So if you think of it as a performance and then think about your ability after the audition to reflect on the experience and think about what you potentially learned from it so that you could grow to not only excel at auditioning, but really love it. And lastly, which ties into that idea of other factors coming into the room with auditions, you can't please everyone. And that's where we get into the do's and don'ts lists. Some casting directors or directors will tell you, don't wear this or do wear this or always do that. And if you're auditioning for a particular director or casting director and you know some of their preferences and you want to lean into that, that's great. If you don't, you can't stress yourself out with all the minutia. You can simply walk into the room and be the best version of yourself that you can be.
Hi, this is Tim Ellis, another one of your instructors. I just want to piggyback on what Amanda said about every audition being a chance to perform and grow. It's completely true, whether it's a singing audition, acting audition, or a dance audition. Particularly with dance, I know a lot of younger performers are afraid of that if they've not had a lot of training. Early in my career, when I lived in New York, I went to as many dance auditions as I could go to just to grow in my comfort at dance auditions. And the more you do this, the better you get and the more confidence you get. This can also apply to singing and acting auditions. And also the idea of just playing. If you go in a room with joy, you'll come out with peace.
The goal of the casting director or the director of the thing that you're auditioning for is to find the right puzzle pieces to put together that that are going to make this puzzle that is a piece of art. I'm telling you this because, again, people tend to take rejection from an audition, a no, right? If you're not cast or not given an opportunity, whether it's a class or a program, as something personal, that you're not good enough or that you're not right for it. And that's just simply not true. I think that favorites is a myth because I believe that the term playing favorites refers to when someone in a position of power chooses people repeatedly simply because they like something about them that is unjust. Versus giving, what does happen a lot in the arts is people in power, such as casting directors, artistic directors, hire people again and again because they trust them, because they've proven themselves to be dependable, because they have proven themselves to have the skill and the consistency of carrying a show. Breaking into a circle can be difficult, but and getting that initial opportunity to strut your stuff and show your stuff, but it's not impossible. Keep in mind, if you're a director or you're a producer and you're producing Evita, which is a show in which the lead character is on stage pretty much the entire show. She's going to have at least 10, if not closer to 14 costume changes. She's going to be singing some high octane singing in the top part of her range. And she's going to have to be able to dance in the earlier numbers of the show, like Buenos Aires. And she's going to have the emotional capacity to carry the show. We use that term a lot. Yes, he or she or they are a wonderful performer, but can they carry a show? And there's no way for a producer or a director to know that outside of having the experience with that person without really looking at their resume and calling their references and finding out. And so usually the audition room can't tell me whether a person can carry a show like Evita or not, or a role like Evita, right? But previous experience can. So that's why you see a lot of people who break into a particular kind of casting circle get cast over and over again because it has to do with dependability. And in the professional world, that translates to money. That translates into the success of a show, which then makes sure that everybody else on the team gets paid well. The directors and the producers are negotiating the balance of hard skills, which we would call like, can I hit the notes? Can she hit the E flat? Can she belt the C? Can he nail a triple pirouette? Can he do a backflip? Technical abilities, even in acting, is this person that I'm casting to be Blanche Dubois in Streetcar Named Desire going to get to that emotional spot at the end of the show 8 times a week, not just once, not just a couple times a week, not just after 6 o'clock? Can she do the matinees as well? Those things really need to be taken into consideration. And if you don't get a particular job again, it might be because they believe that the other person who had the same skills as you did might be able to do it more consistently, or not, right? They might be wrong. And then there's the intangibles like essence and groundedness, right? There are the things that you cannot control when you walk in the room at that point, right? When you walk in the room, you can't control your weight, your size, your look. But by the time you get into the room, once you walk into a dance call, you can't control at that point whether you can land a single, double, or triple pirouette, right? It's out of your hands. You've done everything you could do. You just have to trust that what you're bringing into the room is what they're looking for. And if they're looking for someone that can land a triple and you can't do it, then it's time for you to go back to dance class and develop that craft. Same thing on the voice side, acting, etc. And then there's just likability factor. Some people have, the it factor or the stage presence or some unspoken just aura about them that people are gravitated towards. And to be aware of that, you just kind of have to ask around. And then there's reputation. And that is developed by your behavior. If you, even now as a student, have a reputation of being late, of being judgmental, of being non-supportive of people, that reputation can follow you. You can fix it. You can totally fix it if it's negative. But positive reputations go with you too. There are a couple of KSU alumni who I'm thinking off the top of my head who work in the Atlanta industry who have always had wonderful attitudes. And once they broke into the industry, they may have maintained that reputation of having really, really great attitudes. And I know of performers who may not always hit the best, highest notes and who may not always land the triple pirouette, but they're a wonderful person to have in the room. Directors and producers are always asking, who do I want in the room? Who do I want to spend time with, whether it's a 3-week rehearsal process or a 10-month internship, you want to be the person they want in the room above everything else. And your attitude matters. That's not to say that you can't have a bad day. That's not to say that you can't fight for what you believe in if you're going toe to toe with someone in power. This is just a general sense of having a good attitude and understanding that there are more actors than there are jobs. And so there are a lot of people out there who can hit high C's. There are a lot of people who can kick their face. There are not a lot of people who can do that and be someone we want to have in the room all the time.
Just a couple of things to think about in reference to auditions, etc., and the casting directors. They want you to be good when you enter the room. They want everyone to be good. Just know that your audition begins the second you break the threshold of the room, the second you enter the door, if it's in a studio. They're looking at what your energy says to them. So a positive energy starts things off very well. Also, in reference to how directors love to work with congenial and professional actors, start early in your career, holding on to the idea that 10 to 15 minutes early to rehearsal or whatever is on time. It gives you time to get yourself grounded and prepared for rehearsal. If there's not a warm-up done in rehearsal, then you can also use that time to warm yourself up.
Let's start with single show auditions, since they're probably the kinds of auditions that you'll do most in your career if this is your career path. First of all, you're going to see a common thread through different types of auditions, and that is research. You have the internet accessible to you, and there is so much information on the internet. You just have to have the time and the patience and the desire to really pick apart and unpack all the information that you need to prepare your audition. So first and foremost, research the show. If you can get your hands on the script, do it. Read it, cover to cover. If it's a musical, obviously listen to it, cover to cover. You have Spotify, you have Apple Music, you have good old-fashioned CDs, you have libraries, you have YouTube, which has usually someone has posted most Broadway cast albums on YouTube as playlists for free. So listen to it, cover to cover, really get to know it. You have Wikipedia, you can start there, and then you can dig even deeper to find out, about the original show. Is it an older show? When was it written? What is the time place that it takes place in? Who's the composer? What other shows have they done? What is the style of the show? Because ultimately, it is your job to make the casting director, or producer see you in the puzzle that is the show. How can you do that if you don't know what the puzzle looks like? So then you go and you pick material that hints you towards specific roles. And if you want to be considered for 2 different roles, then at least live within the style of the show. If you are going in for Oklahoma, don't go sing something from American Idiot. Unless it's a cool rock version of American Idiot, right? Sing something from that era, maybe even written by those composers, etc. Similarly, if you're going in for Hamilton, don't go sing something from Oklahoma unless you're going to rap it or sing it like an R&B star. Like, read the room, meaning read the show, and figure out the style of the show. Is it contemporary or golden age? Is it rock? Is it more what we call legit or traditional musical theater? Who is the composer and what is the style of the sound, as well as the style of the movement, as well as the style of the messages of the piece? And keeping in mind, 80% or more of casting has nothing to do with how you auditioned, right? Meaning like how you hit the note or whatever. But if you get yourself 80% of the way there by choosing material that really puts you in the style of the show, literally all you have to do is run the obstacle course. Now, my last bullet point on this slide has to do with casting changes and the fact that casting evolves within the...
Piggybacking on what Amanda talked about with the changing views of casting in the world of theater, which I find very exciting, is I used to always tell my friends in reference to auditions that the worst thing we can do is type ourselves out. What that means is you look at the breakdown of an audition and you don't specifically see yourself in the physical description put in the breakdown, it's sort of our job to change the director's viewpoint of what he or she might see on stage, um, and um, going to the audition regardless gives you another opportunity to perform. It's very exciting that the view of casting has changed, particularly in the recent Oklahoma revival and even Phantom of the Opera, and the recent Sweeney Todd, which was done in New York. That's my 2 cents.
When it comes to coming into an audition for a single show and living in the style of the show, it is your job to come in and tell them who you are, especially if they don't know you. This is kind of exciting for those of us who have felt like, oh, I haven't gotten opportunities in this circle, or haven't done well in that circle. If you move to a new place or a new market, or you're auditioning for a new theater for the first time, it is a clean slate. They don't know who you are. They don't know who you were 2 years ago, right? Or 5 years ago, or when you get done line 10 years ago. They don't know what kind of performer you were, and what your skills were. So you get to come in and tell you who you are, excuse me, through the repertoire, and we'll get to choosing repertoire in a second. The interpretation of the repertoire, right? Your attire, your gender identity. I put that down because those who are on the gender spectrum, right, who identify as non-binary, gender fluid, or gender non-conforming, it is your job to know who you are in that moment in your journey, and to come in and tell me as a casting person who doesn't know who you are and doesn't know your whole journey, how I'm supposed to see you, so that you tell me how I need to put you in my puzzle, right? Because if you are on the gender spectrum and you come in for an older show that exists in a society that doesn't acknowledge that spectrum, like Oklahoma or Sound of Music or Legally Blonde, right? Even something more contemporary, you need to tell me, should I consider you for a sorority girl, or should I consider you for Kyle the UPS man? You tell me, right? And so that's exciting. You get to tell your story through your repertoire choices, through your attire. And here's the deal, because all of you are young and you're evolving in that, those choices get to evolve and change too. And it's very exciting for local casting people. I know this because I've been behind the table on so many shows, especially in Atlanta. That's very exciting for them to see your evolution, especially if you're blossoming like a caterpillar to a butterfly, right? That's okay for you to come in a year later with a completely different look and a completely different book. That's okay. I'm not going to get too deep in the weeds regarding auditions for college programs, because we're going to feature that in a whole nother video, actually 2 different videos that we're going to feature here on the Kennesaw State Summer Intensives page. However, I will touch very briefly on the fact that auditioning for a program is very different from auditioning for a show. If you're auditioning for a show, you're auditioning to, again, be a puzzle piece, maybe inside a bigger picture that a director has a vision for, and they're looking for the right person to embody that character and that experience. Whereas a college program, whether they're an undergraduate or a graduate level program, they are looking for people for their program that they can bring into their community and mold. And they're looking for a particular skill set in terms of what their program has to offer, but also in terms of maybe where their program isn't potentially as strong, and they know that that person is already far enough along in their training that they can be at a certain level to accept the next level. It just depends on the program. It depends on if they're a highly competitive program versus a mid-level program versus programs that are still building their community, right? Knowing the difference between a Bachelor of Fine Arts, a BFA, and a BA, that will be covered in one of our other videos. In addition, there's a fine line, or maybe even a gray area, between confidence and arrogance when it comes to auditioning for programs. Programs are looking for people to come into the room with an air of confidence, so that they know that potentially this person is going to be open to accepting instruction and direction. But they're also looking for a level of vulnerability, because if you come into the room with such a level of of confidence that it reads as arrogance, then an educator is going to look at that and say, well, what do I have to teach them, or what are they going to listen to regarding what I have to give them if they already kind of think they know everything? There's not a better way to say that. So, and lastly, if you're looking at master's programs, which if you're watching this, you're probably a high school student, so you're not there yet. But eventually, master's in fine arts, an MFA is there so that you can acquire more skills, but ultimately your goal would be to teach, right? Master's in fine arts is a terminal degree for actors, and that's required to teach at a university in a full-time capacity. And so those educators, those heads of programs, are looking at a lot of different factors, because they're looking at people who can handle the workload of the masters. They're also looking at people who have potential to teach. They're looking at people who have potential to get through whatever thesis guidelines that they're going to have. And then, of course, talent, to see what kinds of students they're going to bring into their community. Phone rings, door chimes, in comes company. Okay, well, now my dog's trying to help with this lecture. What up, son? Hi, buddy. Okay. Anyway, when talking about company season auditions, these are rarer, meaning sometimes companies hold what are called like generals, and that's fine. Again, same concept. You want to research the shows that they're doing, read the scripts if you can, or at least expose yourself to the styles of the shows, plots, who you would be considered for. Really think about what parts you are good for, meaning the parts you could play, versus what you want and where you are in your career at that moment. Being honest with yourself about your vocal range, your dance abilities, and not just like the general, like, oh, I'm a mover versus a good mover versus a dancer versus an advanced dancer. Like, what do you have? What kind of turns can you land? What are you good at? Are you good at changing direction? Do you have good turnout? Are you good at tap or different specialty styles, hip hop, right? Where's your strike zone? And really tailor your auditioning, if it's for a big option, a big swath of options, to what you're best at, so that they see you as that strong puzzle piece. Become really familiar with who the company casts. Do they cast locals, meaning like the Alliance casts a lot of people out of town, meaning from New York. Sometimes they cast locals, sometimes they don't. You kind of have to go and see shows there to really know like who's there. Are they mostly casting professionals? Most of the professional theaters in town cast professionals. But most of the theaters in town don't pay enough for people to solely make their living off of theater. So everybody has day jobs, right? They cast equity versus non-equity. Most of you, all of you, are probably non-equity. That means that you need to become familiar with what actors equity is, how to become equity, etc., when to become equity. Most of the time you don't want to become equity until you're older or until you move to New York City, because most cities, including Atlanta, don't have a lot of jobs for equity people. And once you are equity, you can't take a non-equity job. The Actors Equity Union is the only union like that. Musicians, other kinds of unions, you can still take non-equity work. Actors, you can't. So become familiar with that, and just pick material that can show off your best skills, as well as give them a hint toward a role you might be good for. Moo. Cattle calls. An example of a cattle call is the Atlanta Unified auditions, which you all should partake in as you're a senior getting ready to graduate. Cattle calls are conventions or conferences in which representatives from a multitude of theaters get together and sit in a room for a general audition, and each actor is given anywhere from 60 to 90 seconds to do an audition package, show those theaters kind of what they do best, and then those theaters representatives can call you back into some callbacks that happen usually either off-site or in the evenings if it's a destination conference like SETC, Southeastern Theater Conference, which takes place every year in early March. In order to participate, you have to pass your state screening, which in Georgia takes place in the fall at Georgia Theater Conference, GTC. The location of SETC moves each year. So this past year, it was in Kentucky. Next year, it's in Cincinnati. UPTA, UPTA, Unified Professional Theater Auditions, is early February. Oh, by the way, SETC offers work for both summer work and year-round. So you can audition while you're still in school, whether you're a sophomore, junior, whatever, and just audition for summer only opportunities, or you can audition for year round once you're a senior. UPTA, on the other hand, only wants you to audition when you're a senior and you are available for year out around work. UPTA is held in Memphis every year at a theater called Playhouse in the Square. They require a pre-screen via video every fall, and again, this is for seniors only. And then Midwest and Straw Hats are both smaller conventions that you can audition for multiple companies. Midwest is in St. Louis every year in February. Straw Hats is in late March every year in New York City. I don't think either of them require pre-screens, but cattle calls are cool because, like I said, you audition for multiple theaters in one big ballroom. It's a huge space. You do your package, and then you go to another room and you find out who has called you back, and then you go sign up, and they turn their hotel rooms into offices, and you go in and you spend the evening going to callbacks for various companies. It's kind of cool.
Also, in reference to the theater conference cattle calls, there is a dance component at all of these for the musical theater performers. And even if you just feel like you're a mover, you should go to these dance calls. At SCTC and UPTAs, some companies might call you back specifically to see you move or dance. If no one calls you back to dance, you should still go to the dance call. They teach 3 different combinations. You're allowed to perform 2 of them. So if you're a mover, you might want to do 1 and 2. You might just want to do 1. But it's always a good idea. Be prepared. Have dance clothes with you at these conferences. It never hurts to have fun with these. My first SETC back in the day, I got 3 more callbacks just from going to the dance call. So don't be afraid of the dance calls.
The kind of pieces that you want to have in your book for cattle calls are the pieces that show you really well. You show your best strengths. We'll get to this in a little bit with picking repertoire. Some people try to show multiple strengths in what we call their general package. Don't overexert yourself. That's what callbacks are for, right? Show if you belt and hit a high C. If you can find a piece in which you can do both, great. If you can't, don't worry. Do one of them really, really, really well, something that you know you can pull off all the time, and then show them that you can do the other thing in the callbacks. Again, research, research, research. Most websites for unified style auditions or cattle calls have a clickable link that says see who's hiring or see who hired last year, and it's usually a spreadsheet online, and each name of each theater is a clickable link to their website. So you can sit there and do the research on all these theaters. It's very time consuming, but it's your career, so it's totally worth it. In terms of material, you can always find out or do some research on what's overdone. Again, we'll talk about this a little more in a second, but finding out what's overdone so that you are not the 20th person of the day to sing the same song that everybody's been singing is usually recommended, but there's a reason for that. Again, ask about the why. Ask yourself the why. Why do you not want to be the 20th person to come in and sing the song Pulled from the Addams Family? If you can, go watch auditions, especially cattle calls. Go serve as an assistant to someone and take their notes, or go serve as what we call a monitor, which is essentially a stage manager for an audition. Let's take a little tangent and talk about educational theater auditions. Now, again, a disclaimer, this is my opinion. It's a really educated opinion because I work in both professional and educational theater, and I like to think that I have the students' best interests at heart. But it's my opinion, so take it with a grain of salt. I think that educational theater and casting procedures should be different than the professional world because our goal is to provide the best experience for the students. So this is kind of trying to find the balance of the best person for the role versus the opportunity. Meaning, some people think it's totally okay if the same student plays the lead 3 times in a row in the musical because they earned it and they're the best for the role. So we're mirroring professional practices, and that's totally fine for them to think that way. I don't think that way. Even if you're the most talented human in the world, the goal of educational theater is to educate everyone and to give everyone opportunities. So I might cast you as a lead in this musical, and I might cast you as a supporting role in this musical because I wanted to give that other person an opportunity and then give you the opportunity to be the supporting person. There are varying degrees of agreement on that, but that's what I believe. Also in educational theater, your other work is taken into consideration. When you audition for me as a director of a musical, I can't ignore what I know of you and how you behaved in my classes, how punctual you are, how dependable you are, your attitude, your support of other people. And I also continue to take into consideration your progress. I will reward people for good work over the course of X amount of years with an opportunity if it presents itself. And sometimes people get in a huff about that, like so and so, isn't the best dancer or isn't the best singer and didn't deserve to be cast in that role. And to that, my answer, but they did deserve to have an opportunity to perform on the main stage before they graduate, and this was the best opportunity. So shut your mouth, kindly. I also believe that a director's job in education is educational in nature, which means that, again, I think the easy way out is to cast the person who can hit all the notes and dance all the dances right away and who has access to that emotional capabilities. But it's a little more of a challenge to choose someone who I believe within 3 months or 5 months or 6 months, however far away the show is, might grow into the role and might experience significant growth with the challenge of that casting. So again, I try not to have favorites. People can accuse me of having favorites or not. I try not to. I try to reward people for their work. I try to give people opportunities based on what they've done so far. I try to spread the wealth because we are a BA program. And I know what it is to teach in a BFA program. I know what it is to teach in a BA program. A BA program means we spread the wealth, and that's the goal. I also don't believe in blacklisting. I hate that phrase. No one's off my list. You could be incredibly rude to me. You could, come late 6 times to rehearsal and never tell me why. You could post something terrible about me on social media. I'll be upset about it. But if you end up apologizing later on and saying, hey, I see the wrong that I did, or I was in a bad place, or here's why I behaved in that way, please forgive me, or here's what I was going through, and we have an adult conversation about it, I'm fine to move on from that. So I don't believe in someone being like on my never hire list. Some casting people have those lists, and they have them for good reason. It's not just because they don't like you. It's because you've done something, or someone has done something to really upset them. They pulled out of a contract. They've badmouthed the company on social media. They've been cast in shows before, and they've been super undependable. So there are reasons why certain directors and producers don't like to hire certain people, and it's because they've misbehaved. And again, we're talking about money here, and we're talking about people's livelihoods and being in a room in a collaborative nature with people for hours on end. So keep in mind, just be yourself, be nice, be kind, work hard, do your best. You should be fine.
Like Amanda, I love working with students in educational theater. I completely agree with her as far as casting goes. The tough thing for some students, and it might particularly be toward a BA program, which we have here at Kennesaw State, there might be fewer students with dance experience. And you get to the musical, and you're a singer and actor who sort of moves, but you have no confidence. So you might blow your audition so you don't get cast in it. The great thing about educational theater is you're here to get an education, not to be perfect. Also, as a director choreographer, it is my job to stage and choreograph for every student. That doesn't mean that what we put on the stage is lesser than what you might see somewhere else. But it's my job to also push you toward growth. Push is a strong term, but ultimately, it's what it might feel like to you. Your education experience is to challenge yourself. If you do go to a BA program for musical theater, get yourself in dance classes. Everything's important. We're quadruple threats: acting, singing, dancing, and our own little business. So thrive in everything you can do. All right? Thanks.
Okay, here's the fun part. Your audition material, that is your run-of-the-mill basic, what we call your go-to pieces. If you're auditioning for a cattle call or a season or just a general audition, should say the following three things listed on your slide. This is who I am. This is what I do. This is what I love. The material should show off who you are, the essence of your humanity. The material should show off your skills, meaning like, what are your money notes in terms of singing? Your money notes are not your highest notes. Your money notes are the notes that give you the most power. For some people, they're super low, right? For some people, they're right in the middle of their belt. For some people, they're really high up there, right? Your money notes. Also, your acting money notes. Your acting strengths, maybe your comedic timing, maybe your vulnerability in dramatic moments, maybe your ability to connect to something super melodramatic, right? And what you love. You should love all the pieces in your audition book. You should be able to look into your audition book and go, I love singing that song for people. I just love that song. It really communicates my truth. Full disclosure, in the previous segment, the "this is who I am, what I do, what I love" saying was stolen from a friend of mine named Jonathan Flom, who stole it from his friend, our friend, VP Boyle. So I can't take credit for that, but I can take credit for this analogy. I like to think of my audition material as a pair of glasses. Now, I could put on a pair of glasses, and I also would want to talk about my strengths, right? So I think some of my strengths, since I'm here on video, are my eyes. Everybody's like, oh, your eyes are so pretty. And I'm like, thank you. I did nothing to deserve them, so I can go ahead and brag about them. Right? I have these crazy blue eyes that change color and all that cool stuff. Now, if I put on this pair of glasses, you can still kind of see my eyes pretty well, with the exception of the glare of this video screen. But if we were in person, you could pretty much still see the color of my eyes. You could see my strengths. If I put on this pair of glasses, you can't. Now, you can still discern a lot from, you can kind of see behind them, and you can discern a lot from how I'm talking and what I'm doing and the other things that I'm doing to communicate who I am to you beyond the glasses. But I've put a little bit of an obstruction there for you. I feel like picking good audition material is like picking a clear set of glasses. Audition material should help me, the casting director, see you really clearly, really be able to discern what your talents are, who you are as a person, and again, what kind of puzzle piece you're going to be for my show. If you put on a pair of glasses like this, meaning a piece that is outside what we call the strike zone of what you do, it doesn't mean I can't see you. I'm just going to have to work harder. Or you're going to have to work harder in your preparation of the piece for me to really believe you, right? It all comes down to believability, right? When we're watching a piece of theater, do I believe the story that's being told or do I not? And that has to do with, again, picking material and putting people in roles that it's kind of like, oh, that person was born to play that role. They were written to play that role. If I sing something of Mrs. Lovett from Sweeney Todd, I would consider that in my strike zone. She's eccentric, she's kind of bubbly, she's kind of strange, she's got some baggage and some layers of life to her. That all resonates with me a lot. Picking material sung by the character of Sarah in Guys and Dolls would be a bit of a stretch for me. It's outside my strike zone. Again, it's not that I can't sing I'll Know. I can sing I'll Know pretty fine. It's not that I can't act it. I could act it fine. But you're going to have to work harder to believe me, and I'm going to have to work harder to make you believe me if I pick that as my audition material. So pick material that's in your strike zone. This is easier said than done because you have to figure out what that is and who you are. And you have to do the research to find material that communicates that. That's where your friends come in. That's where your musical theater nerds come in. That's where anthologies come in. That's where playlists that help you get exposed to a whole bunch of different kind of musical theater pieces come in. That's where those take-home research projects that I made you do come in, right? Listening worksheets, etc. Those projects are designed to expose you to more repertoire so that you can find the material that is the clearest pair of glasses for you. I love this expression, high risk versus low risk. I like this better than do's and don'ts because, again, it really makes you think of things that you do in the audition room that are maybe considered outside the box are considered high risk because they're either going to have a great payoff or a really crappy payoff. Some examples of this include overdone material. Here's the deal. Harkening back to the strike zone and the pair of glasses. If look after exhaustive looking over of material, because it will be your job as a professional musical theater performer to be familiar with the canon of musical theater repertoire out there. If you've gone through that canon and you swear up and down that the best choice for you, the clearest pair of glasses, the center of your strike zone is whatever popular song of that year. If it's Waving Through a Window, if it's Pulled from the Addams Family, if it's Gimme Gimme from Thoroughly Modern Millie, that used to be an overdone song. It's not anymore though. All I Need Is the Girl from Gypsy. If you swear it's you, it helps communicate who you are better than any other piece you could find, then do it and do it well. Knock it out of the park. Because then if you do it well, and there were 8 other people that did that song that day, but you do it really well, we're going to notice that. It's high risk. Low risk is doing something that isn't overdone, but isn't too obscure, right? Also, super obscure pieces are high risk because, and this comes from the mouth of my friend who is a music director, you do not want them spending your entire audition trying to figure out what is that song. They want to figure it out and then watch you. So you don't want it to be so obscure that they've never heard of it before. Again, material far from the style of the show is high risk, meaning style bending. If you do come in to an audition for American Idiot or Rock of Ages with a piece from Oklahoma, but you're doing it in a weird kind of way, or you're doing it to be ironic, or you're doing it for a specific role that you think is like, I'm going to go that route, great, it's high risk. It could totally rock, and they could be like, wow, that was super smart and original. Or they could be like, what is she thinking? That's the honest truth, high risk. Let's talk about gender bending. The conversation around this has changed in the past couple years. When I was in school, it was an absolute no-no to do a song that was originally sung by another gender, right? For me to go and sing Being Alive from Company was like, no. Now, they don't really care. As long as it fits in the key, as long as it fits in the style, and again, I'm going to say that this statement again. If you consider yourself on the spectrum of gender, meaning non-binary, gender non-conforming, or gender fluid, it is your job to tell me how you fit into my puzzle. But it is high risk if you come in and fight against that puzzle. Does that make sense? There is also an ever-evolving conversation about material from racially specific roles. Currently in the industry, it is a no-no. It is frowned upon. It is high risk for a white or Caucasian person to sing a song that is originated by an African-American or character or a person of color, right? Something from In the Heights, etc., especially if that song is from a show and a character that is singing about their experience as a person of color. It would be inappropriate for a white male to sing Make Them Hear You from Ragtime. This conversation may change. There may be an exception to that rule, but it's extremely high risk. Now, it doesn't work the other way around because of the systemic issues in our country around racism and the lack of opportunities and stories being told for people of color. Meaning a person of color can come in and pretty much sing anything within reason, right? There's going to be some characters and some stories out there in which it's racially charged, and it's probably ill-advised. Again, high risk. You have to do the research on the show and look at the historical context of the show and really think critically about, is this the best choice for me? What am I saying? What kinds of risks am I taking by choosing to sing that song? And who's going to care? Is this a director that cares? Also, the only way you can find out, again, this is the last note, you can't please everyone, but you can get to know their style and their boundaries by knowing what kind of work does that theater do. Is it a theater that pushes boundaries like Actors Express or Seven Stages? Or is it a theater that generally stays within traditional boundaries of casting because of their audiences, like the Atlanta Lyric or City Springs?
Story time in reference to high risk. If you choose to do a song that's sort of done a lot, but you do it really well, I believe in sticking to that. I was in New York for about 9 years. I was blessed to work pretty frequently. In 9 years, I probably used 6 different songs. There was one song that I used 80% of the time. But if it's something you believe you do well, then you should stick to that. So story time in reference to that, I was at an audition, singer's audition for Cats. Cats used to always audition in a theater if it wasn't in their theater. And we were in line up this spiral staircase. And so you could hear 8 to 10 people singing before you, 32 bars. Um, Standing in line behind this, I could tell he was a younger performer, but everyone in line was an equity, a union performer. And about 5 people in front of him, we heard someone sing, I Met a Girl. And so he sort of twitched a little bit and was like, well, that's the song I was going to do. What should I do? Should I change my song? And I told him, if it's the song you do the best, then stick to that. And he said, all right, so I'll just go out and I'll tell them. I was like, no, you don't have to tell them anything. Give the accompanist your music, the tempo, go center stage, do your slate, and go. And he was like, all right. And in this particular instance, you could watch the person in front of you audition. So I was watching him to hope that he listened to my suggestions. He spoke to the accompanist, he walked center stage, and he announced, well, you just heard this, but now you're going to hear my version. You don't want to do that. Stay confident in what you have. Our job is just to go out there and perform, not give sort of feedback to what someone else did or to give definition to what you're about to do. That's my story time.
When you're choosing material, a couple of the first things you want to look at is A, length. Most auditions are going to ask you for either a length of bars in terms of measure numbers, or in terms of time. They might say a 1-minute cut or a 2-minute cut, 32 bars versus 16 bars. Some places count these, some are not so literal. You want to stay in the vicinity. Also, generally, we're talking about the amount of bars that you're singing, not counting like intro and outro. But, use your better judgment. Don't freak out if it's like 33 bars or 15 bars or 16 bars. Like, just be in that general vicinity. If they're asking for 16 bars, they don't want you to sing for 2 minutes. And quite honestly, and I got a lot of wide eyes when I said this in class, I know after a couple of seconds whether you have what I need or not. And then you have the rest of the time to prove me right or wrong. It's true. After a couple of seconds of you singing, I can discern tone, I can discern range depending on how it is, I can discern connectability. And then again, you show a little more with the rest of it. So you may think 16 bars is short, but it's not. It's pretty good, pretty standard. You want to make sure that your cut has a beginning, middle, and an end. If you're choosing a cut that starts in the middle of a song and there's a prepositional phrase like but or and, take it out. So if the song originally, it's somewhere in the middle, you start the cut, it's like, but I told you, right? Just cut the but and just start singing, I told you, right? Because it doesn't make sense lyrically that you start on a but or and so well, right? Cut those out. Just don't sing it. Just sing the next word. And then, of course, I always get this question. Should I do it in context or out of context? Read the musical, read the play that your piece is from, or listen to it from cover to cover, know the context, and then connect it to your personal circumstance. If you're singing It's Hard to Speak My Heart from Parade, which is super specific, you should know it's based on a real story about a Jewish man who was here in the South who was accused of murdering a little girl named Mary Bacon. This is the end of Act 1, and he's on the defense stand. He's on the witness stand as his own defense. And he's trying to tell people that he didn't do it. Right? You need to know that. And then you may be singing about, I don't know, a breakup or something. But you need to know that in case the people behind the table say, do you know the context of the show? And you go, yes, I absolutely do.
All fantastic information. And yes, I have been to auditions where they cut everyone down to 8 bars because so many people showed up for the audition. So do make sure that you have some 8-bar cuts here and there. Definitely beginning, middle, and end. Um, if an audition, this is just a thought, allows for a full song, as some do here in Atlanta, consider, I'm not saying do this, consider doing 32 bars because they can tell within seconds your ability and your connection, etc. Um, if you choose to do 32 bars, there's a better chance that they may ask you to do something else that is maybe more similar to the shows they're doing, or if they want to see something else from you. Um, there are auditions in New York for union performers, equity performer auditions, where each person gets 3 minutes when they go in the room. A lot of people choose to do full songs, which is fine, but again, they can tell very soon your abilities, etc. Again, if you choose 32 bars there, because you have 3 minutes, there's a better chance of them saying, hey, what else do you have? Make sure you know every song that is in your book, because when they want to see more, the accompanist might start flipping through your book and find a song you haven't sung in 5 years. So do be very careful about what is in your book of audition material. That has happened to me. Luckily, I knew the song. So yeah, there's that.
So you can read the slide, and I know a lot of these things go without saying, but I'm just going to review kind of just the big bullet points of what you should do in prepping material. And let me tell you, I've been doing this for over 20 years professionally. I've been working since I was 17 years old professionally. And I still do these things for my audition pieces, right? I sit down and I do my homework. I practice with a live accompanist or coach, right? A couple years ago, I asked Christina, who was our accompanist at the time, like, can I have a half hour of your time and just work on these pieces so I don't have to play them at the same time? Doing my homework, right? Just like I taught you to do with the solo song character journal. Type out your lyrics for your 16 bar, your 32 bar cut. It's just going to be one page. Put little lines or spaces in between them and write in your objectives. Figure out a tactic, an active verb for each line or each beat. Practice in a safe space, right? Your bedroom or a studio, a practice room, your backyard, whatever. Practice in a space where people aren't listening to you and giving you unsolicited feedback. Tell them to leave you alone, whether it's positive or negative. It's not their business. Listen to the accompaniment without singing a few times. I learned this lesson when I was 8 years old, and I had a voice teacher named Janet, and she made me a tape back then of my accompaniment for What I Did for Love from the chorus line. And she said, you have to, every time you sit down to practice, you have to listen to the tape, the accompaniment to the song from start to finish without singing along at least once. And I was like, why? And she was like, because you have to get that music in your body, ingrained in your body, so that you can communicate through it. And she was right. If you're singing, you're not listening, right? So you have to learn to listen first and then sing along. Once you've really learned your piece, try it multiple ways. Try it slower, try it faster, try it with a totally different scenario or context and see if anything comes up. Play. You might make a discovery, one little discovery that you keep. That's a great moment. And above all, be ready for adjustment and direction. I've been in plenty of audition rooms where the director is just super eager to work with actors. They're an actor's director, and they like to listen to you do your package, and then they go, okay, great. Can we do it again? And this time, can you? And be ready to play and let go of whatever preconceived notions you have about the piece and what you're doing.
I love playing with new material, as Amanda has said. Particularly with new songs, I will monologue the song first. We are storytellers, so we need to make sure we can tell a story. I type the lyrics out as a monologue. Before I acknowledge the beats, I will just read through it quickly, and then I'll acknowledge the beats, and then I'll see if I can perform it as a monologue. It's a little tough if it's a rhyming song. You don't want to get caught into the meter rhyme, but try to find the story. And after I've found the monologue in it, if I know the melody, I will sing through it quickly. It's something I also do when I'm learning monologues. Running through things quickly helps you memorize, and sometimes you'll find a different beat. When you start rehearsing the song, try different tempos to see if it changes the meaning, and look at how the composer has constructed the melody and the music, because low notes might mean one thing, higher notes mean something else. This is a whole other thing you'll get into in college if you hopefully take a script and score analysis. But as your younger performers, don't be afraid to play.
There's a big debate in the musical theater world on the best way to prepare music for an accompanist. Some people like to put audition cuts on these manila folders, so it folds out nice and neat. The only trouble with this is we don't have the rest of the song in case you're in a private audition and the music director says, oh, can we hear a different part of the song? Some people want to put things in sheet protectors like this. That's fine. Some accompanists hate the glare. You can even see the glare in this video. Like, I personally don't care. I'm low maintenance. I'm fine. As long as you minimize page turns. You can do double-sided music like this, or you can do a taping or stapling method. Some music directors hate the staples. Again, it just depends on who you're dealing with. At the end of the day, consider the why. The why is we want to minimize page turns. The more time my hand comes off the piano to turn your page, the less time my hand is on the piano. And the more you're risking me screwing up your cut if I can't get it back to where it needs to be, especially if I don't know your cut and I'm sight reading. Sight reading is really hard. Okay, for those of you who are not musicians, I'm here to tell you, sight reading is the most advanced thing a musician can do. Therefore, even the people who are good at sight reading sometimes mess up. We're humans. So you want to make it as easy as possible for me to accompany you and make your audition awesome. You want to make sure that there are 3 staves, right? You're going to make sure that your work has, or the music that you have has a vocal line plus 2 lines underneath it within a stave, within a paragraph or a system for the piano part. Make sure the piano part is there. You cannot take just your vocal book from a show you did, because a lot of times it just has the vocal line. I don't know what to play for you as a pianist. I don't know what to play for you. A fake book, those are books that just have vocal lines with chord symbols on the top with letters. Those are not acceptable for auditions either, because they don't give me any information about rhythms or how I'm supposed to play underneath you. Make sure it's in the correct key. There are tons of ways to figure this out. You can take it to a live accompanist, pianist. You can send the sheet music to someone like me and say, can you play through this and send me a track and make sure it's in the right key? Musicnotes.com has these amazing tools where if you spend the $5 to buy the song from them, you automatically get a playback. It plays it for you so you can sing along and make sure it's the correct key. It's not too high. It's not too low. And you can also change the key in Music Notes most often. You want to clearly mark where you stop and where you start. I'll have some examples of this in the next slide. And if you want a bell tone, if you want to hear bling, that's the starting note before the pianist starts your actual cut. Above all, bring it to a real human who plays piano well, and they can tell you whether it makes sense or not. Especially if you've made an internal cut.
You'll see this in the PowerPoint version of what this video is about and prepping your material. But yes, it's very useful if you go to a conference where you do a monologue and a song and you choose to do the monologue first. What you want to do for the accompanist is I can't say that word today. Write the last line of your monologue at the beginning of your song choice. So if you've cut 16 bars, right where that music starts or where the bell tone is, where the intro is, you write the last line of your monologue to know what their cue is. If it is a line that repeats several times within the monologue, let the accompanist know. You can even write it, 3rd time I say this is the cue.
So I'm going to reiterate that sight reading is one of the hardest things a musician can do. It's really hard. And so with the accompanist, rule number 1, be nice. Very nice. Okay, sometimes they're really tired. Sometimes they're socially awkward. Sometimes they're playing hundreds of auditions within the course of a day or two. But it's your job to be nice because they're your best friend in the room. You'll hear this time and time again. Don't blame them if they mess up during your audition. They're human. The people behind the table already know the quality of the accompanist. So here's the deal. If they've been messing up all day, they already know that. Like, just say they're not a great sight reader, they were hired last minute or whatever, they're a friend of a friend, whatever. If they're not a good accompanist, they already know that. So you don't need to be like, ugh, right? Don't do that. And if they're a great accompanist, and they mess up and you go, ugh, you're going to look like a jerk because it must have been you because they've been nailing auditions all day. Right? And so you are responsible for accurately communicating your tempo. You are responsible for knowing what that cut sounds like. And you are responsible for taking it to a pianist in advance and asking them, how tough is this? Right? I know things now from Into the Woods sound super easy when you're singing along with the original Broadway cast recording. It's super hard to play, and it's super hard to line up with a singer because it gets really weird, especially in the bridge. Right? But you don't know that when you're singing along with the cast album because like she's nailing it and you're nailing it with her. And there's like orchestrations, but as an audition piece, it's really tough. Same thing with Giants in the Sky. It's pretty tough. You should know the song so well that you could sing it a cappella. If you do, God forbid, get off sync with the pianist, you should be able to just keep going. And above all, keep a practice track or an accompaniment track on your phone, a clean one, right? Have someone make you a clean recording that doesn't have you being like, okay, here we go, right? That like the recording starts, you hear a bell tone, you hear the intro, the song plays, it stops. Just in case something happens with the accompanist or something, they don't have an accompanist, you can always be like, cool, I have it on my phone. Do you want me to play it from there? And I can just sing. And they'll say, great.
I'm going to put an amen on the don't mistreat or blame the accompanist. There will be some who don't sight read very well, but they're giving it their best. And a very acceptable thing to do, even if you've given the accompanist your tempo and you walk to the mark, you do your slate, they start playing in a tempo that's completely off. It is acceptable to stop what you're doing and say, I'm sorry, this is my fault. I was not clear with the tempo. Then go back to the accompanist and try to get things squared out. This will look better to the people behind the table toward your professionalism. Never give the blame to somebody else. If it messes up, take it on yourself. There may be something in your verbiage that the accompanist didn't connect to, and why they're playing a tempo that's way off from what you need. Yeah.
Now you have the basics, so it's time to go find some pieces. If you are unfamiliar with the canon of musical theater repertoire, a great place to start is the Singer's Musical Theater Anthology. It's the collection of books that have different colors. There's 7 volumes, and within each volume is a book for each voice type, right? So actually, 7 times 4, there's 28 of them, plus there's a couple of teen books, audition cut books, and duet books. But there's so many of them. Guess what? There's a great tool on the Hal Leonard website, that's the publishing company, called the Song Finder tool. They're PDFs of the indexes of all of the songs that are available in their anthology. And guess what? I have most of the PDFs of those songs. Don't ask how I got them. I'm a pirate. There are also Spotify playlists that have been created by musical theater nerds for each book. So if you're like, oh, I want to listen to all of the songs on volume 3 of the Soprano book, there's a Spotify playlist where someone like found all of them and clicked and dragged them into a playlist that you can use. Other anthologies are great too. If you're looking for a Golden Age piece, look up the composers of the Golden Age: Gershwin, Berlin, Rodgers, Hammerstein, Bernstein, Arlen, Porter, Kern, Go look. They have anthology books for all of those guys, and you can use the internet and just go one by one and listen to them and find a song that you really like. Musicnotes.com is the best resource ever. It has developed over the years, so we're really proud of it. It has a great app for your device that has the free accompaniment practice track that comes with it when you purchase it. You can also figure out how to save the music as a PDF so you can reprint it. App Componist is a great app that has been developed and used on all devices to help you get piano tracks. Piano Tracks is a great source as well. These are all clickable links in the presentation. And then over here in the other column are other musical theater sites that have sheet music and have like little search engines for you to find sheet music. And then Musical Theater Resources is a great blog by a guy named Kevin Michael Jones. It also includes some resources like you can purchase repertoire lists for your song type and recommendations. It's really great.